Now, I'll finish up this background lecture with two quotes from a researcher named David Lubin at Georgetown University from a paper that he wrote in response to the ticking bomb argument, where he characterizes torture, and in particular, he talks about what's so insidious about torture and why it is, he thinks, that some people, even people who have gone through examples or instances of being waterboarded as part of their military training, for instance, fail to really understand the psychological impact and what he thinks of as the net evil of the practices that were conducted by agents of the US government under the direct orders of the highest levels of the United States government. So, in reflecting upon what is so particularly morally heinous, so evil about torture, Le Bon tells readers the following on page 19 of his paper. In the case of torture, he tells us, the connection is with fearful, degrading, soul-destroying events. Fear is perhaps the most important evil maker connected with the pain of torture. The torture victim never knows whether his torturer will do even worse things. The uncertainty is perpetual. Today it may be torture light, sleep deprivation, or bombardment with loud cacophonous music. Tomorrow, the torturer may beat the prisoner, or mutilate the prisoner, or kill them. And so Le Bon thinks that it's not just these isolated acts, it's not even the terrible adverse sensations that they give rise to, but it's the perpetual, unrelenting uncertainty, the disorientation, the confusing, the degradation, the fear, combined over a long period of time that constitutes the real evil of torture. And thus, in commenting on why it is that he finds that even people who've experienced, say, waterboarding during the course of their military training, say as Navy SEALs, argue that it really isn't torture, or that the actions of people when they do this don't constitute some heinous moral evil, because they experienced it and they got through it, and they aren't scarred for life. They weren't destroyed as human beings. It just didn't strike them as that evil. Lubin's response to this is as follows. He says these arguments are silly because they focus only on physical sensations and neglect the crucial difference. SEER participants, SEAL trainees for example, and soldiers in basic training know that those inflicting the treatment on them have no intention of killing or maiming them. They also know that within a short fixed period of time, the treatment will stop. They have none of the fear of a torture victim who knows neither of these things, and whose captors tell him that unless he talks, he may be in Guantanamo forever. Torture inevitably intensifies with pain. And so, Lubin suggests that even those people who've had sort of similar experiences to the experiences that are described here really haven't experienced what the prisoners in Abu Ghraib or other facilities experienced. These experiences are qualitatively different on his view. They're qualitatively different because the people who experience this have none of the reassurances, none of the certainty, and none of the confidence of the finite period of their treatment. These people have that perpetual uncertainty about what will happen next. They're perpetually disoriented, confused. They're told that this may never end. They have no trust that they're not going to be maimed, killed, or tortured again and again and again. And for this reason, Lubin says, the experiences that someone has if they're waterboarded once in basic training, or they're shackled for a few hours, or they're deprived of sleep for a day, they just don't compare the person who is forced to inhabit a coffin-sized box for days at a time, whilst hooded, paraded out in the hot sun for 120 degrees for hours at a time, forced to parade around naked in front of other prisoners, in front of women, forced to wear women's clothing, waterboarded again and again and again, waterboarded no matter what they say, whether it's truthful or dishonest, whether it alleges to be helpful or alleges to be defiant. And this, according to Lubin, is the real evil of torture. This, according to Lubin, is the sort of experience that people who are tortured go through. And it's qualitatively different from experiences that we might have when we have painful sensations. Say we hit our finger with a hammer, or we go through basic training and we get waterboarded, or we're deprived of sleep for a day. So all of this is very unpleasant. And it's been necessarily sort of graphic. But it's all largely factual in nature without a lot of editorial interpretation. And hopefully it helps us to have some insight into the real circumstances that characterize the sorts of behaviors that we're actually talking about when we look at Dershowitz or when we look at Scary.